Welcome to lesson 4.2, properties of definite integrals. In this lesson, we will continue to approximate area under a curve on a given interval, but we're going to be using definite integrals and also some formulas from geometry to help us find those areas. And so we will not be using the Riemann sums that we used last time. Last time we used rectangles and we allowed those rectangles to get smaller and smaller, and then the number of rectangles under the curve approached infinity. And what we found was that in theory, if we took that limit, we would get the exact area under the curve, and taking that limit results in what is known as the definite integral. So we're also going to look at some geometric functions that may contain negative values. So negative areas or areas below the x-axis as well as areas above the x-axis. And so this is something that we also did not see last time when we were working with Riemann sums. And this is another extension of that work that is better handled by definite integrals. So let's talk about negative area. So sometimes we're going to have functions that dip below the x-axis. In fact, a lot of functions do this. Sine and cosine functions, cubic functions. So area below the x-axis is going to count as a negative area. And the total area between A and B for some curve is really a net area, where the total area below the x-axis and above the curve is subtracted from the total area above the x-axis and below the curve. So here's a picture of this. In this case, we've got, this is a nice illustration of what looks like a hill and a lake. And so you can see the lake is below sea level, and so that's a negative area. And so if we wanted to find the net area of this region, it's basically subtracting the water from the land. So the area above minus the area below. So the new notation that we're going to be dealing with is actually this fancy looking S, which stands for sum, and it's going to be the integral, the definite integral from A to B. Remember that A and B are actually the endpoints of our interval. F of x is the function that we are integrating, or it's the function that is bounding our area, and dx is the differential. So the way that we would read this statement is the definite integral from A to B of f of x with respect to x. So just like we had dx before when we differentiated with respect to x, now we're integrating with respect to x. So let's break this down a little bit further and talk about each of these components. So first we have our integral sign. So this is the symbol for integration. And the function that's being integrated is called the integrand. We have a lower limit of integration and an upper limit of integration. And so these correspond to the endpoints of the interval over which the area bounded by f is being considered. X is the variable of integration, just like x was the variable of differentiation before. And so the integral of f from a to b, this is what we're going to have when we find the value of the integral we have evaluated the integral. So we can consider the area of the region bounded by f of x on the closed interval from a to b to actually be this integral, this definite integral. And so this will take the place of computing and adding Riemann sums. Now before we move into actual integration, we want to take a little time to look at some piecewise functions and determine how or what this really means conceptually by applying some geometric formulas to help us figure out what this would be.